Hello Milky friends, Milkstew here with you for another Idle Heroes video. How are you? I hope you're well. So today's video is about my experiences and the lessons I've learned in passing Pioneer area for Void Vortex. There'll be no gameplay video because I didn't bother recording my efforts. I sort of staggered my efforts over across 2 days. I didn't do it all at once. So if you're expecting gameplay videos, you're going to be disappointed and you should just go away. So that's just my immediate upfront caveat. The other thing that I won't be covering is also, I'm not going to tell you how to set your heroes up or which heroes to use. Simply because it's too broad, right? It's not like there's one or two particular heroes that you absolutely need that will clear every single wave in Pioneer. The reality is you need a range of heroes from a variety of factions to have any chance of doing well in Void Vortex. It's not like Aspen Dungeon where really you only need 2 heroes to get to Death 100, right? With Void Vortex, the waves, there are just way more waves, different kinds of waves. And there are just an infinite number of lineups that will work for you or may not work for you. So that's the only thing to keep in mind. And that's why I will never do a video on thou shalt use this wave, these heroes on this wave. The combination is just too large. What I am going to give you is the general sort of lessons I learned getting to Pioneer. Clearing Pioneer. So now I'm in the Explorer stage. And so before we get there, you might ask yourself, well, Milkstool, why would I bother watching this video? I mean, what's the incentive to go from Pioneer to Explorer? So for most of you, especially game players, you should be somewhere between Pioneer 3 and Pioneer 2 every single week. And so for me, I was generally, the highest I ever got, Pioneer 2, never beyond that. And I knew that was my limit and I just didn't want to push it. And so I was like, well, then hang on. The difference between Pioneer 2 and Explorer 6 is 2,000 of these Stellar Shards, which are now all of a sudden very important for Imprint, right? And it's 2,000 shards every single time this Vortex opens up, which is twice a week. So it's 4,000 shards as a minimum that I was missing out on every single week. And I thought, wow, that is a lot. And that advantage, that's an asymmetric advantage that builds over time. People that started early, got to Explorer early, they are reaping the benefits right now, right? And the people that, arguably got to Valiant, they are reaping their even greater rewards. And the reason why you want to clear an area is because, like with Aspen Dungeon, if you clear all 6 levels or tiers of an area, like Pioneer, right? So if you clear all the way up to 1, you start at the next area like straight away. You don't have to re-clear Forerunner, Pioneer, etc. You start at Explorer 6 if you clear Pioneer 1. And similarly, if you clear Forerunner 1, you start at Pioneer 6, which a lot of you would already know because I'm guessing like 80-90% of you are at Pioneer 6, right? You're not new players. If you're new players, then this is not important. Don't worry about it. Enjoy the game. Watch my masterclass videos. But if you are here, it's because, you're part of Void and you are now at the next evolution of the game. So that's the reason why you want to seriously consider clearing an area as quickly as you can. It's because of the amount of Stellar Shards that you get just instantly from clearing Pioneer or Explorer or whatever level area you are at. Right? So that's the reason why it matters. Now, here are the key things, the lessons that I've learned if you want to successfully clear an area, right? And this applies not just to Pioneer, but anything further up, right? So, here are the lessons. There are what I call gates to pushing for higher tiers. If you do not pass these gates, just stop watching this video, don't bother. Everything else below that does not apply to you, so all right? So the first thing is you need to be able to clear waves or tiers 6 to 4 with 1 energy and not use a single segment, right? So for me, that meant that I had to clear, right, Pioneer 654 every time Vortex opened without using a single segment, and without shuffling the lineup, right? So I would only use 1 energy burn every time I saw an enemy. And for 99% of the times, that's what happened. No issues. Where I started encountering difficulties was with Pioneer 3, 2, and 1. At Pioneer 3, I noticed I had to start using Sigmets and or start shuffling the lineup that I faced. if I thought, I just couldn't beat that lineup, even if my certain factions were protected. So if you do not meet these two hygiene factors, these two gates, right? Well, the first gate more importantly, then don't bother. The second thing is if you don't have a broad lineup, right? So if you have, for example, heavily stacked the kind of heroes you have been building to 2 factions or 3 factions, you're going to have a fucking hard time, right? Because the reality is there's a tension between Sigmet and energy burners that you have to manage from the level or tier 3 to tier 1, right? So if you don't have a breadth like I do of heroes in different factions, so I've got mine stacked towards light and dark, but I also have, thankfully, 2 forest heroes that are very relevant. So Rogan and Garuda are very, very good in Vortex. Sherlock's kind of useless, but he's still useful. And Tix is insanely good in Vortex, right? Abyss we can kind of ignore. I don't really need a good Abyss hero. To be honest, I didn't use Delacium when he was protected, when Abyss was protected. So I had a breadth in terms of my lineup, meaning that my Sigmet burn rate, because you need to start using Sigmets at the later levels or the later tiers. If you don't have the breadth, you're going to be compromising with Sigmets, and at some point you're going to run out of Sigmets, right? And so the key thing to note here is you need at least 10 to 15 Sigmets for tier 1, right? So by the time you've burnt your energy, you've done your Sigmets, and got yourself all the way up to, say, for example, for me, Pioneer 1, I did the math. Like, you have to have at least 10 to 15, you have to have at least 10 to 15 Sigmets, because the 5 or 6 planets that you encounter, the 5 planets, right? With 10 Sigmets, that means you can deploy 2 Sigmets per planet. And if you're lucky, just 1, right? As a minimum, I just plan for 3, contingency. So that's why I said, if you don't have at least 10 to 15 Sigmets by the time you get to Pioneer 1 or level 1 of an area, then don't bother. That's almost like the next, I would say that's another gate, right? If you don't meet that 3rd gate, just, it's going to be very hard. And based on my experience, you're just not going to pass that tier, that last tier of the 5 planets for a particular area, right? And so I said here, at the higher tiers from 3 to 1, you're balancing the use of Sigmets and energy burners, right? Sigmets you cannot buy any more of. Energy burners you can buy for 25 gems, but at some point in time, it's just going to get super costly. Because let's say, for example, and how this balance works is, let's say, for example, only half let's say you only had light and dark heroes, and the Sigmet only protected the light heroes, right? What you can do on some planets is and what I did was I just re-rolled the wave that I faced, because there were just some waves that no matter which faction was protected, I knew I could never beat it, and I had a spreadsheet of waves I could just never beat. Like, typically they were triple Aiders or triple carries and double Garuda, multiple carries, multiple Garuda waves, and I just knew I could never beat those waves. And so my limit was 3. If I spent 3 energy on trying to beat a wave, even after shuffling stuff around, I just gave up and I just reshuffled on that planet. Because at some point in time, you just don't have the power to clear that wave, no matter what combination of heroes you use. But like I said, Sigmets you cannot replace, but energy burners you can. So you want to, where possible, rather than use a Sigmet, re-roll and find just a much, much weaker wave, just with heroes that, just out of the meta that your hero set can beat. So then when I got to a planet for the tier 3 to tier 1, every time when I got to a planet, I asked myself 3 questions. The first question was, can I ever beat this wave? If the answer is no, then you just use energy burn straight away, because you just wouldn't use Sigmets, right? I keep a spreadsheet of waves that I know I can never beat, but intuitively I also know which waves I can never beat. Like I said, triple Aiders in my experience, double carries and double Garudas, I just cannot beat those waves. So rather than waste a Sigmet and just protect a bunch of factions, I just use my energy bin and I just tried instantly rerolled, found a weaker wave, right? Otherwise, the next question I ask is, do I have enough heroes and protected factions to beat this wave, right? And generally, I needed 2 out of 3 sort of factions to be viable, as in I needed light dark or dark and forest, for example. 2 out of 3 or 3 out of however many, like 2 to 3. If I had to put a rule on it, you need at least 3 factions to be protected. Or depending, and this goes back to the up here, like what's your lineup breadth? Based on my lineup breadth, I needed 2 to 3 factions to be protected. And, you know, if light and dark were the ones that were protected, I was pretty sweet. I had enough E5 heroes and I could configure them in such a way that I could pretty much beat most waves. If it was just only a dark, for example, and there was no light, then I had to rely on Shadow, for example, being there, and Forest being there. Where this worked against me, where I knew I had to use a Signet, was when there was a transcended hero that was protected, and when there was an abyss hero that was protected. And sometimes, especially at levels 2s and level 1, it's when the fortress hero was protected, because there are no fortress heroes that are good, as far as I can tell, in Void Vortex. Like Sherlock becomes like just useless at the higher levels. Like the energy swap and the doving doesn't do much, right? So that's the only thing, and that's with that's my Sherlock. Just so you know, it has a splendid Rui as well, right? He's just no good at the high levels of Pioneer, right? So anytime I got those 3 waves, those 3 protected factions, I knew that I had to. So it was Abyss, Transcended, and Fortress. At Pioneer 2 and Pioneer 1, I knew I had to expend Signets, irrespective of whatever wave, especially at Pioneer 1 and Pioneer 2. If you want to clear those, it's about Signet protection for your key factions, right? And if your key factions aren't protected, you got to spend the Signets, irrespective of the lineup, right? Because after answering question 2, do I have enough heroes and protected factions to beat this wave? If the answer is no, you got to burn Signets, right? And hopefully, you got to use it sparingly, right? So you got to get you don't want to use all of them, so you don't want to protect every faction. You just want to use it until the key factions where you have like strong heroes, E5 heroes that are void imprinted, are then suddenly protected. Like, so for me, my void imprinted heroes are Tix, which is a shadow faction, as well as Russell, so light faction, right? So that was the second question I asked. So after answering the second question, then obviously I would have a go at trying to beat the planet with the heroes that were protected. And I did a rule of 3. After 3 tries, after shuffling around sort of like heroes, lineups, artifacts, and things like that, I just basically stopped and I just used Energy Burn to shuffle, right? And I just shuffled until I found a weak lineup. And after you've expended Signets, it's almost a waste not to just burn energy to find a way that you can beat, right? Especially at the higher levels, right? Because you've wasted that Signet, which you can never get back. So therefore, it's in your interest to clear that wave. And you can it's after you've protected enough factions, it is in your interest to find a wave that you can clear. Otherwise, like I said, that Signet is wasted, and you've just wasted all your energy. And this is especially relevant at Pioneer 1. I got to Pioneer 1 with 10 to 15 Signets, and I got down to the last planet and I just, for the life of me, I couldn't beat one particular wave that they presented to me with the heroes that I had. And so I was like, fuck it. I'm at Pioneer 1, I've got 1 planet left. And this probably applies, I've got 2 planets left or 3 planets left, and all my key factions are protected. At that point in time, you're probably like, should I spend gems? The answer is fuck yes. If you are at, Pioneer 1, Explorer 1, or Forerunner 1, you should absolutely start thinking about considering spending gems to find ways that you can beat, especially if your key factions are protected, right? And so I know a lot of this is common sense, but I know a lot of you might be like, well, Milkstool, this is fucking basic. Like, that's my strategy as well. And I'm glad it is. But for me, it took me a while to just really fine tune and work out this macro strategy. Because I was just sort of going through the motions every single week. Like, I was just burning Signets without ever giving much thought as to how, I should be using it a bit more strategically, right? Like, sparingly use the Sigmets, and just knowing when I can never beat a wave, and just committing 5 energy burns, and just knowing that eventually, if I get to Pioneer 1, that I'll have to spend gems to clear that wave, right? So that's my macro advice. Hopefully you found that useful. I know a lot of it is common sense. If there's something that I've missed that you think, oh, Melkster, okay strategy, but have you considered this? Leave it down in the comments below. I am very open to feedback, as you probably read from my. The final thing I will say before we end the video is there's actually a brute force strategy that involves a bit of luck. And the brute force strategy is this. So if you get to sort of Pioneer 3 or Pioneer 2 or level 2, level 3, 2 of a particular area, the brute force strategy is this. Like I said, counts on luck. If you have, say, 25, 30 Sigmets left, right, and you get lucky, with certain tiers of planets where the right factions become protected. Like for me, it was light and dark, because I have a lot of key heroes in light and dark that are very important, that'll help. That are very good in Void Vortex. So like Russells, Carries, as well as Drakes, right? So when light and dark showed up, I was like, great. When that happens to you, right, theoretically, the brute force method is you just need to keep burning energy burners until you find a right wave you can beat with those heroes. A weak wave will turn up where you can just beat that, because those factions are protected. With the heroes that you have, you can just beat that wave, right? And so what happens is and this is going to cost a lot of gems, but you would argue, is that actually worth it? It is if you sort of are at the point where you get to Pioneer 2, Pioneer 1, and you have enough Sigmets left such that you can waste them and you can find key factions to protect, right? So, you get lucky, and by the time you get to tier 1, for example, and you end up with 10 to 15 Sigmets, then it is absolutely in your interest to spend gems to burn through as many energy burners as possible, finding weak waves, right? So for each planet that you cycle through, say in Pioneer 1, if you ever get there and you have 10 to 15 Sigmets left, use your Sigmets to the point where, all your key factions are protected, right? So then the heroes that you have that are really strong and they're void imprinted, they'll be protected. You use those in your lineup, and then all you do, the one variable that you can control, because you can't get more Sigmets. So that one, a bit of luck, and you should 50-50 if it goes your way or not, right? But if it goes your way, use your Sigmets up to the point where you protect the key factions that have your key heroes. And then the one variable that you can flex and control with gems is energy burners. Keep burning through and finding a weak wave that you can beat with your hero set. That's the brute force way. That's not something for everyone, because you're like, oh, gems are valuable. But given how important void imprints are now, and what a huge advantage it is to start at just having smashed through all 6 level of a particular area and just start fresh at the next area. What a huge advantage is on a week-to-week basis. I would argue it's almost worth spending, investing 2, 3, 4,000 gems in it. It'll pay off in the long run. That's the brute force strategy. Anyway, guys, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. I will see you tomorrow for the campaign and Wishing Coin event. Thank you. Bye. Comments.